You definitely. I noticed the more and more people are showing up without their picture. What do you think that means?
Well, for me, as soon as I get home, I'll turn on my video.
Maybe they're eating breakfast.
Maybe it's time to move the Shiur back into the shul.
Right, just disconcerting to look at a bunch of names.
My computer is restarting, so I'm on my phone.
Okay. Oh, no. You
I'll
don't
be
have to
back
bring it.
soon.
You don't have to bring a note from your doctor.
No, did you really mean that? Really?
Okay. What I'd like to do here is a 1 minute of review. And I'd like to, now that I've gone on a bit of a tangent, I'd like to go on a further tangent because it's very nogay l'maisa, with your permission. But if you recall, the Nefesh Hachaim was discussing the union of attachment. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, and Neshama's attached to Hashem, and the avoda in this world is simply to attach our nefesh, which is us, our bodies, our psychology, our personalities, our talents, to attach them to our ruach to the neshama, and then we're spiritual people, spiritual beings on this world. If we do that, then we're fulfilling the purpose of our creation, which is attachment. The purpose, the reason why Hashem made the world, as I keep on speaking about both in Nefesh Hachaim and on Shabbos, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, for those of you that come, we have Omek and Arichos, and the point that we have to end up coming, Shimon Bar Yochai came out of the Yemara, and Hashem said, Lahachriv Lami. Yes, also, what about the world? You know, what about the world? And you go back into the cave, continuing education. And what it means to say is that we don't practice detachment, we practice attachment. And I explained that Yosef, the Nefesh Hachaim, says that if you're not attached, you're noifel Gehenna, which is not a, according to this, not as much of a punishment as it is a consequence. The consequence being that if you want to detach from your nefesh, from your ruach and your neshama, so then noifel Gehenna, because you're part of the earth without being attached. Whereas if you're part of the chain, when our nefesh leaves us, right, we have Yitzias HaNefesh. So then everything gets pulled up, our nefesh, ruach. Well, I'm talking about the nefesh right now. But Yitzias HaNeshama min haguf. So then everything that we've done goes to Shamayim, or Lasid Lava, and it's come B'tchias HaMesim. And the Mela, we're Bnei Olam Haba, but if we're detached from that whole Marechet, so then what happens is that Noifel Gehenim, Nofel, Taika. It's not, I mean, there might be a punishment called Gehenna, but that's not what we're talking about here. Give me 1 second. So that's what we've been learning. A little better. One of the places that the Zohar that the Nefesh Hachaim brought was by Yosef. And Yosef, they made him a bor. And the Zohar says, when they threw him in the bar, they were basically throwing him to Gehenna. Yosef, go to hell. And what that means is that they viewed him wrongly, but they viewed him as total detachment from anything ruchnius. He was a gashmiistic person. He was power hungry. He was mesalsel b'saroi. He proved through his years, even when he was the king of Egypt, he proved that he was not, although he was completely attached to the world, he was actually ahead of them in the sense that Yosef Hayab in Mitzrayim, he was Mala the Mitzrayim. His job was he was able to resist Eishes Potiphar. And he was able to even resist the intimidation of Paro. And he brought Kiddush Hashem, that Hashem Yiftar es Chaloim Paroi. He brought God into the picture in Egypt. Something that didn't last ad hayom hazeh, but at that time he did his thing. So the pshat in the bar being Gehenna, my question was like, what do they want from Yosef? The bar is Gehenna. But the answer is yes. Their inyan was he belongs in Gehenna. Hashem took him out of the bar and put him in Mitzrayim. So that's what we talked about last week. What I'd like to explain a little bit better now, and something which is extremely important, and I'm sure parts of this you know, but I just want to go over it, look up at Shuas. Something very, very important. The truth is that the story of the Parshias of Yosef, anyway you tell the story, the whole thing's a pliatsuma. It's a cloud of gray from two parts. Number one is, why were the brothers so mean to Yosef? It's just unbelievable. I mean, it seems that it was like Ritzicha. Let's throw him in the bar. Let's get rid of him. It's just a pella that the brothers who, to us, are role models. When we talk about like in the names of the Shvatim, they're on the choshen of the Kohen Gadol, and the names of the Shvatim, if you take the oisius of it, it comes to the Shem HaMeforish, the Zohar says. So we're talking about like our avos. We're talking about a very chashuv group of people. Not talking about a bunch of rioters. These are very chashuv people that went to kill Yosef. It's built to move on. But at the same time, it's also not understandable Yosef's reaction, because Yosef's reaction was also a reaction of revenge. It seems, how much he was Mitzar. Forget about the brothers. He was Mitzar's brothers, but how much he was Mitzar Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu, were all his years since Yosef left, nobody could comfort Yaakov Avinu. He was in such a deep state of avelus, depression, of Shaar Lagid. And nobody could comfort him. Yosef, with one word, could have been what happened afterwards, Vayechi Yaakov. The Rashi says that when Yaakov Avinu was so depressed, the Shechina left him. So how could we explain Yosef? And I'm sure we've all heard Vertelach on this, but how could we explain how Yosef could possibly cause such tsar and Bigarim, the Siluk HaShechina, in the way that he did? And he went on and on and on, Meraglim Atem, and no, you have to bring Binyamin here, and such. And we don't even find at the end that he was particularly connected to them. So I just want to explain, this is the Shalah. Now, there's some obvious connections, if you will. Thank God, we're living at Eretz Yisrael, and we're living in the time of the Geula. And, I don't have to convince anybody the miracles that we see here in Eretz Yisrael every day. But it's hard to take what I'm going to say and not compare it to what's going on now, but that's not what I'm doing. I'm just learning Chumash right now, and I'm not talking any kind of politics. But I want to base what I'm saying on the Shalah Hakadosh. The Shalah is in the Sefer Torah Shebiksav Tzoin Yosef. In the Shalah asks the question I just asked, and I'm going to read it to you. Noida malas hashvatim gedola ad moed. We know how great the shvatim were. Shebevadai malosam yoser mi malas malache hasharis. Shvatim, Shimon, Yehuda, they were bigger than the malache hasharis. Vehein besoid yud beis tzirufei shem havaya, as I explained. Eich Yitfais HaSeichel asks the Shla, Zeh HaDavar Shebnei Aliyah Ke'ela, that people on such a madrega, such tzaddikim, Yasu b'yachad ha'avera ha'gedola, not only they did an avera, but they came together to do an avera. Avera ha'gedola shebachol ha'avera shebaylam, the biggest avera that anybody could do, hainu ritzicha, is to kill somebody. That's worse. Every other avera, it's like as if you, like if you talk lashon hara, it's as if you killed them, but killing them is the aviyavois ha'avera. V'dimu la'avargas Yosef, ubefrat, specifically, how do you kill anybody? But lahareg ish sadik amud yisoid olam. Davar kazeh eino isa afilu rasha gadol. Who does that? That's the Shla's kasha. The Shla answers. I'm going to say a little bit of my own words and then say it in his words. That the machlokus between the brothers and Yosef, starting with the dreams that Yosef had, until the end, was because Yehuda was the Bechor of Leah. Yosef was the Bechor of Rachel. Yehuda wasn't a Bechor, but he was the Melech. Reuven messed up, and he became the din of Melech. So what you really had here was a question of Bnei Rachel and Bnei Leah. Why Yehuda became the Bechor, why he became the king, La Yasser Shevet Mi Yehuda, is a discussion, but not for now. Says,
are you throwing into the mix Mashiach ben?
Yes. Let me a few minutes, please. So Yosef had dreams, and his dreams, Chazal tell us, were nevuah, wasn't just a dream. And his nevuah was that not only will his brothers need to bow down to him, but even Yaakov Avinu, which taka was a Peladic dream. Says the Shalah that Yosef, the Bechor of Rachel, and for that matter, Binyamin, the Bnei Rachel, and the Bnei Leah, were b'machlokes and the Geula. According to the La Yasser Shevet Mi Yehuda, and according to the regular thinking, if you will, of the Shivtei Yisrael, Malchus Yehuda, the whole purpose of Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, the Shvatim, was to do a tikkun and to bring a geula. That geula would be a tikkun for the chet already of Adam HaRishon, something that we've been struggling to make a tikkun for, to go back into Gan Eden, hi geula. What their thinking was, let's talk about their thinking, let's talk about Yosef's thinking. Ephraim, just bear with me for a minute.
Always.
Thank you very much. There's a din of Melech Yisrael, Yehuda Melech Yisrael, David Melech Yisrael, Chai v'Kayim. What happens in order to do a tikkun, in order to bring Mashiach, bring the Geula, in order to be Masak in the Chet of Adam HaRishon, it went through so much, but the Avos came to be Masak in that Chet. In order to do that, you have to have Malchus, as we've explained many times. Malchus is when, as we're talking about, when Ruchnias, the Or Hashem, hits ground, and the world becomes Kadosh. We say this in Aleinu L'Shabeach every single day. B'yom hahu yeh Hashem l'melech al kol ha'aretz. B'yom hahu yeh Hashem echad u'shmo echad. Right? Hashem echad u'shmo echad. Hashem echad is here. Shmo echad is here. It all comes together. That's the tikkun. That's the geula. What happens in halacha if somebody is moired b'malchus? If he rebels, against the Malchus. Let's say there's a Melech Yisrael or a Melech Yehuda, and somebody rebels against David HaMelech or any of the kings of Israel or the Mashiach. So what happens? What happens is if somebody's married by Malchus, we're sorry to ruin your day, sir, but you're Chayav Misa. Why are you Chayav Misa? That sounds pretty strong. Because you're being Ma'akiv the Geula, nothing less. It's extremely important for the Geula to happen, for the Tikkun to take place, that the Malchus does its thing. So comes the brothers of Yosef, and they hear the chaloimos of Yosef. The chaloim being that Yosef should be the melech. That was the chaloim. Mishtachavim li. Hashemesh v'yarareach v'chadasar kochavim mishtachavim li. And the brothers are saying, listen, brother, we're trying to do a tikkun here. We're trying to create a malchus, and you're not allowing us. You're being married by malchus. You're coming up with your nevuas, and you're totally involved in the gashmias of this world. You look at your dreams. Look at your behavior. You're caring about your appearance. We need to kill you. You are being ma'akev, the Seder HaGeula. And simply put, Yosef, in their minds, was married b'malchus. Married b'malchus in the sense that you were taking the gashmius over the ruchnius. Let me just finish the sentence. You're taking the gashmius over the ruchnius, and our choice of death for you is to throw you into a bar. And a bar, as we learned in the Zohar and the Nefesh Hachaim, that represents total detachment from the world of Shemayim, from the world of Neshama, from the world of Ruach, from the world of God, from the Ora Torah. You're in the bar. The bar is dark. The bar is dark. And the bar is, as the Zohar says, a mashal for Gehenna. So that was the das of the brothers. That was what they thought at that moment. Of course, they weren't successful because Hashem does his thing and he knows what's emes and what's not emes. But their thinking, says the Shalah, was acceptable. I'm just going to read you a word I copied down from the Maharal in the Gur Aryeh Bereshis Lamed Zayin Beis. And there the Maharal says, Nilmad, Shayisnagdus liYosef, Haisa mechuvenes el ha'uvda, sheYosef haya nechshav lebechayr shel Rachel. Ukeshem, listen to this, she'esav hisnaged liYaakov b'shil b'charasai. What was the whole story of Yaakov and Esav? The story was Esav didn't like the idea that Yaakov was the Bechor. Listen to this comparison. Say kach lahavdil elef havdalos, ha'achim hisnagdu liYosef machmas b'chayrasei. Who made you into the Bechor? Lahavdil elef havdalos. The brothers took the place of Esav here and went all the way down to Ritzicha to get rid of this ikuv of the Geula. Now, I'm not explaining why they were right. I'm explaining what their thinking was. So says the Maharal, and so says the Shalah.
The comparison Elf Hados is Yosef to Esav or the brothers to Esav?
He says, Lahavdil elef halfei havdalas ha'achim hisnagdu liYosef machmas b'chayrasei. So it sounds like the brothers were the place of Esav. You don't find that Yosef was trying to kill his brothers. They're in the place of Esav. That's what it sounds like. You could, I considered it the other way also, but I think that's what it sounds like. Now, there's another side to this argument. And that is, what was Yosef's thinking? What was his nevuah? Not what was he thinking? Well, thinking everybody thinks. But what was actually his nevuah? And his nevuah was, says the Shaar HaKadosh, that emes, the tikkun of the world, is going to come about through Yehuda and through David HaMelech. And David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim, and Mashiach is Mashiach ben David. But before you get to the tikkun of Yehuda, there's a prior tikkun that has to take place of Yosef.
Is this Yosef's intention, you said?
Say it again?
Is this Yosef's intention to do this? This was his thought? He
Yes.
recognized Malchus.
Yes, and how do I know? First of all, because the Shaar says so. You have to mute it.
Maybe you can make a co-host who can take care of that.
Yeah, we have the same conversation and you can mute upon an entry. The Shaar says so, but what's more important, God, is that was the nevuah of Yosef. I had a dream, and the dream is that Hashemesh v'yareach v'achad asar koichavim mishtachavim li. And to this, the brothers said, "Ma pitom." What can you possibly mean? You're diverting the whole geula. But what is the emes? What was the pshat in his nevuah? The pshat in his nevuah is, and I'm going to read you the words of the Shaar because it's beautiful, that before Malchus, before David HaMelech, Mashiach ben David, can do his thing, come into the earth, so to speak, you have to till that earth. As tzemach David abdecha meheres hatzmiach. It's like putting a seed in the ground. If you put the seed on the ground, unlikely the seed's going to grow. If you till the ground, if you plow the ground, if you make the ground muchan to the seed, even though it's not going to grow in a million years, comes tzemach David abdecha meheres hatzmiach, the seed of David can go in there and it can grow.
Is Yaakov aware of this relationship? Did Yaakov know this is supposed to be happening like this?
I have no idea. Yet. Comes the Shaar, and he explains the following. I'm going to read you his words. Aval shtei bechinois malchus yeshnam b'Yisrael. By the way, I'm being careful to quote the Shaar because, frankly, this is always quoted as like Rav Kook and his, poetic imagination. I'm reading the Shaar, and the Shaar comes from the Arizal, and the Arizal comes from this. This is a very, very basic yesod all over the Zohar in Klal Yisrael. So this is his words. Shtei bechinois malchus yeshnam b'Yisrael. There's not one but two kinds of malchus. Malchus Yosef or Malchus Yehuda. Malchus Yehuda, he ha-malchus ha-ikris v'ha-tachlitit. Ach lifnei she'oisem malchus tuchalis galois. But before you're going to see a seed sprout, tzricha lakum malchus noisefes malchus Yosef. You need to see the Malchus Yosef first. Shemat harasa, what is the Malchus Yosef supposed to do? Okay, till the ground. What does that actually mean? Very important. Matarasa, the matar of Malchus Yosef is la'aged es Yisrael. Now think of the whole story that happened in Mitzrayim with the brothers. V'al yedei zeh yu klal Yisrael muchanim lekabel al atzmam es Malchus Yehuda. Meaning there is no way that the Klal Yisrael will be able to be makabel the Malchus of Yehuda, read David HaMelech equals Mashiach, until there's la'agid es ha'am. We ought to be one in this. It's not going to work. We can hope for Mashiach. We can say we want Mashiach now. We can do everything, but it's not going to work until the Malchus of Yosef does its job. Says the Shla, Hashvatim loy hevinu davar zeh. They did not understand that there has to be a Malchus Yosef to be till the ground. Rak hayusurim, they held. Shuhu, meaning Yosef, mevakesh hamalucha be'etzem. They thought Yosef was a crown grabber. You're trying to stop the Geula. You're trying to take the Malchus for yourself. Loi ulazaroi, that it'll go to Yosef and his sons. Alkain hashvatim holchu doisana. That's why they went to Dosan. And the Chazal say, levakesh nechole dosais, to collect their opinions, their das, like Misrad Adatot, Doisana. Kilomar ladon osai bedas Torah, Dalad Tov. V'izkimu kulam, and they all agreed, watching Yosef, watching what's happening to their divine plan, listening to the what they didn't believe were nevuas of Yosef. Hiskimu kulam shehu ben moves. Afilu bnei bila v'zilpa oyavav hiskimu kain mitzadin v'dos. Me'acher shechoyleik al malchus beis David. V'chol hachoyleik al malchus beis David kechoyleik al hashchina. V'zel ma she'amru Chazal shitfu hashchina imahem. What an amazing Chazal that is. That the Shechina was with them when they threw Yosef into the bar. Kalaymar. Ki choylek hu al hashchina me'afer shechulak al malchus beis David. So that's pretty wild. So there was a Malchus Yehuda. They were ready to go. They were ready to move. And they saw Malchus Beis Yosef as a digression from the mission of Tikkun. So they got rid of Yosef.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What the Shla is saying now is that all the 11 Shvatim were cognizant of the future hamlacha of Yehuda, Kri, David. But at this moment in time, this was before the episode of Tamar, before the episode of Yehuda coming before Yosef and accepting responsibility, before Yehuda himself had acted in order to establish himself as the Bechor Kri Melech over the Shvatim. It would seem that there was this acceptance of the future before the present was able to be conducted itself and to bring about the future.
Right.
There's an internal contradiction there.
Right. Well, yes and no. Meaning they knew that they need to bring a tikkun, and they knew they had to create malchus. Look at it from a Kabbalistic point of view to make it easier. Malchus means they knew they had to bring the Shekhinah to the whole world. I mean, these were just 11 brothers hanging out, but they knew they had to bring it to the whole world, and then they didn't know how. How is it going to Druksachos? That Hashem knows. And then comes somebody with a dream who sounds like Havdalah of Havdalahs, like, Reform Rabbi. Like he's coming with a dream and saying, like, the Malchus goes to me. Who are you? And they weren't Makabal and Nevuah. That was the chet. The whole group was not, we don't know Yaakov's opinion in all this. We see Yaakov understood Yosef because Kol Ma Shalomad MeYitzchak Masar LeYosef, and he gave him the Ksoinus Hapasim, which is the Big Day Malchus. So we see that Yaakov did understand here, but I don't have more information than that. But
Rabbi Haber?
what they were doing was being kofer. They were doing was being kofer in the chaloim or the nevuah of Yosef. And when a Navi talks, it's the same thing that we did to Yirmiyahu Navi. We didn't like what the Navi was saying. We weren't makabel in nevuah, and it went against them ad kedei chiyuv misa. But by the way, to me, it's not a dover pashut that the chet of the brothers of Yosef, before we justify it too fast, the chet of the brother Yosef stuck with us for all the generations. In other words, Asar Ruge Malchus, which is the time of the end of the Bayis Sheni. So that was still talking, they're still talking about the chet Mechiras Yosef. Why? Because it could be they were still arguing then. Like it didn't go away. But let's get there. What do you want to say, Yitzhak? And then I'll go further.
When they answered the Yosef after the Shalom, Hamlotim Loch Aleinu, there's no answer from Yosef recorded. Does that mean that he didn't answer or he didn't know an answer?
It's very possible that he didn't know the answer, because a Navi is saying the word of Hashem. He was sharing a chalaim that he had, a young man with a dream. He was sharing the chalom, and it could be he didn't realize he was going to. First of all, he certainly didn't know that they were going to look at him as a Merid B'Malchus, that you see from the Psukim. But he also may not have understood fully what the whole thing means. But he did understand that it was a nevuah. A Navi knows when they have a nevuah. And he knew that had to be, but it was again, let me just sum it up. It was a disruption, if you will, in what they thought to be the Seder of the unfolding of the Geula.
Why couldn't they recognize it as a nevuah?
Why what?
Why couldn't the brothers recognize it as a nevuah?
Imagine today, if somebody would have a nevuah that it's not time for Mashiach, it's time for something else. Don't forget that they thought, I'm saying things that I know, I'm not saying things that I don't know because I don't want to guess and conjecture here. But they thought it was the time of the Geula. You see in Parshas Vayechi, Bikesh Yaakov L'Galei Sasaketz. They thought this was the Geula, and it might have been. Not for this story, maybe it would have been the Geula, or at least the beginning of the Geula.
But they did exactly the opposite of what Yosef was, the Mashiach Yosef was all about. They did exactly the opposite and created Pirud.
Yeah.
Right. Did
which
Yosef?
Maisa Avo Simon Lebanim.
Exactly what I'm saying. Exactly what I'm saying. I want to talk more about this.
Did Yosef's tafkid come to fruition at Har Sinai? Ishachad Belevachad.
Okay. Let me go further, please.
Yaakov understood Yosef's dream. Shamar Shadavar.
The Navi. I'm glad everybody's so excited, but just calm down. Here's a Navi we read in Parshas Vayigash, which we all know. I just want to read it to you. It's from Yecheskel Lamed Zayin. Va'ata ben Adam, Yecheskel said. Kach lecha, Yecheskel's nevuah. Ata ben Adam, kach lecha eitz echad, because alav liYehuda u'lebnei Yisrael chaveroi. V'lokach eitz echad, because alav liYosef, eitz Ephraim, b'chol beis Yisrael chaveroi. Hashem told Yecheskel, take a stick and write on it Yehuda, and take another stick and write on it Yosef and Ephraim, eitz Ephraim. V'karav oisam echad al echad, la'etz echad. Bring the two sticks together. This is Yecheskel talking about the Geula. La'etz echad. Graft them into one stick. V'hayu la'achadim biyadecha. And they will become one in your hand. Sounds like a miracle. Koi amar Hashem Elokim. This is what Hashem said. Hine ani loikeach es eitz Yosef. V'nosati Yosem alav es eitz Yehuda. V'asisam la'etz echad v'hayu echad biyadi. V'asisi Yosem l'goy echad ba'aretz. U'melech echad yek l'kulam l'melech. V'loy yiyu oid l'shnei goyim. V'loy yechatzu oid l'shtei mamlochos oid. I have to say, whenever I come to, I'm sorry to be emotional, but whenever I come to those psukim, I'm going to start to cry. Because what Yecheskel was saying so clearly, what Hashem was saying so clearly, is that until the Eitz Yosef and until the Eitz Yehuda become one completely, so there's not going to be a Mashiach. You see in the Mefarshei Tanakh, the Chibur and the Pirud. For instance, what was it all about when David HaMelech became so close, best friends, with Yehonasan ben Shaul? David, descendant of Yehuda, and Yehonasan, descendant of Yosef, yeah? What it was about was an attempt to be ma'ached these two pieces, these two eitzim, Eitz Yosef and Eitz Yehuda. Maybe we can do it. And if Shaul would have been the Melech, Shaul would have been Kilu the Mashiach ben Yosef. Yeah? And then Mashiach ben David would have come on top of it, David HaMelech, and they would have been Misached. And would they have been Misached, that would have been the Gula right there and then. What messed that one up was Shaul HaMelech did not do the right thing with Mechias HaMalek. He was told to do Mechias HaMalek. The popular vote amongst the people was, don't destroy Amalek. What are we destroying Amalek for? And don't destroy Amalek. He went with the popular vote. It's the story in Tanakh. And Shmuel HaNavi told them, you're not doing a job. We need to think about Amalek. Let's put it on the side for a second because I'm already digressing twice, so I don't want to digress too much. But what you have there was an attempt to bring the two eitzim together. And when the Malchus split between Malchus Yehuda and Malchus Yisrael, that was a departure from the Achdus of the Shvatim. I want to read you something here from the, again, from the Shla, same Shla. Except the same Shla, but a different place. He says this in Kehillat Gimel. This is unbelievable, it sounds like. Aleinu ladas, according to this whole story, that afal pi she'ein partzufeim shel Yisrael shavim zeh lo zeh. Truth is, nobody looks alike. Nobody is alike. Everybody here on the screen, everybody in Klal Yisrael are a little bit different. This is already a famous shalah. Everybody has a tziruf, a connection. It's just like your fingers are connected to your toes, but they're different. You know, you're different. Your kidney does one thing, your fingers do another thing. I found here in a mimer of Ramosha Shapiro, Zeichet Tzadik Livracha, my Rebbe, who speaks about this agav, and he says, I just want to read you his maskana. He's the one who brought the second shalah, and he said, this is Ramosha Shapiro. We have to get above the different partisan distinctions. And take it on that what Yosef needed to see, I'm not going to go over the whole story because you know the story. What Yosef needed to see was a complete achdus in order for the Gula to take place. That was his job. The two things that he needed to see was one, that Yehuda took responsibility for Binyamin, meaning Yehuda ben Leah took responsibility for Binyamin ben Rachel, and there was a complete achdus there. So Yosef needed to see that they understood that there has to come together, and until he saw responsibility of Bnei Leah for the Bnei Rachel, his job could not be done. And so let me go back. If the brothers would have understood and made way, allowed a place for Malchus Yosef, so then they wouldn't have to go through all this. And I will go further and say, we wouldn't have to go to Mitzrayim altogether and become slaves in Mitzrayim. It wouldn't have to be. All of that 210 years was a tikkun for the Mechiras Yosef to try to bring us together. And the truth is that it wasn't until not Yisachar Mountain Torah, but Kishakara as Hayom, when the sea split and they went in 12 different ways, and they came out and everybody was friends. At Har Sinai, Har Sinai was even more. Amru kulam ke'echad. I'm sorry, Amru. It's lashon there. Nasa v'nishma kulam ke'echad. How's the song go, Yaakov? Uvo kulam v'ris yachad nasa v'nishma amru ke'echad. So what does that mean? Nasa v'nishma amru ke'echad. So meaning that they all came together, meaning Yehuda and Yosef. I want to now point something out. That I think, first of all, I think that what we're talking about right now, I'm obsessed with it. That I don't think, that I know. I'm obsessed with it because I think it's mamash the avodas hayom. I don't think there's, just like the avodas hayom after the Holocaust was to build back yeshivas and the communities that were ruined, and that still continues to be the case. You have to build more Torah and have to learn more Torah, without question. There was also an avodah of achdus, and this situation is worse and worse and worse. and no side in this equation, whatever sides you want to take, is any better at this than the other side. Everybody's on everybody. Let's give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Is everybody feels the other one's ma'akiv the geula. So if you read this paragraph, Rav Moshe Shapiro al pi ashla, he was right accepted gadol Moshe Shapiro, Talmud of Rav Dessler. You know that the achdus is not, I don't think, what we think it means. Achdus, you know, as I always say, doesn't mean that we all hold hands, shoulders, and we sing "We Shall Overcome." I don't think that's. Achenu is a better one, but "We Shall Overcome" means that we're all the same, equality. That niggin, I'm talking about the niggin that I'm talking about, was talking about equality. The achdus that we're talking about is an appreciation for the fact that Kemosh afal pisha ein partzufim shel Yisrael shavim zelazeh ein deyoisam shavim zelazeh yesh tziruf echad. It's not about being the same. It's dafka about being different. When Bilam looked at the Machane Yisrael, so one of the beautiful things that he saw and complimented on us is that all the Shatim were Masudar. Here's Shimon, here's Yehuda, here's Reuven, here's Levi. Everything was Masudar. Nobody's saying that everybody's got to, homogenize into one piece. But a basic appreciation for the fact that people are doing different things. But specifically, the Navi Yecheskel talks about of understanding there are those that till the ground and there are those that sow the seed. And nobody should, now the problem is the mashal that's given by the Mekubalim is that Yosef is the Lev and Yehuda is the Rosh. And they bring many, many rayas to this. So the Lev, it's like this, like the Ratzon, hear me carefully here. The Lev is the seed of the Ratzon. So, and we spend a lot of time on Shabbos on Toho Kabaru. But the Lev is the seed of the Ratzon. You can't do anything you want just because your Lev tells us. I was learning with a bar mitzvah boy this morning. He just put on his tefillin this morning. I was telling him, like, if that's the only time I get to say the Yehi Rotzain, the L'Shem Yichud before the tefillins when I say it with these kids. Liach Toshem Yudke Bevavke. The idea is what it says there, right there in your siddur, and maybe we should say it every morning, is that we have to be ma'ached the Rosh, Tefillin Shel Rosh, with the Tefillin Shel Yad, has to be echad. Yosef was the Lev, represented the Ratzah. Yehuda represented the Rosh, the Mach, the Seichel, the Machshava. Ha b'loi ha lo shava klum. Think about it. Just like when you have a feeling about something, it must go before you do anything, whether it's halacha, Torah, or just in your own life. You don't work with feeling alone. You put it through the keli of your seichel, and you make sure that it's the right thing and you're doing it correctly. You don't get married to somebody because you feel like you should get married to somebody. You feel like you should get married to somebody, and then you make sure it's the right thing. Mitzad Sheni, it's just as true that Rahmana Liba boy, that if you have Yehuda without Yosef, you've got the Seichel saying, this is what you're supposed to do, this is what you're not allowed to do, this is what you have to do. But let's say, to take my example a little further, but you don't love the lady. Or you don't love your husband, or your chassan. So you know what? I don't know, a lot of people give a lot of eitzes about this. My eitz is drop it. Because you need the Lev and you need the Seichel, and that's why we're putting on tefillin. You need Yosef, you need Yehuda. And if you don't have it, you make it. But you need the Lev, you need the Huda, and you need Yosef, you need Yehuda, and everything that we need to do, including and especially the Geula. If you don't have both pieces, it's just simply not going to work. So when we're talking about Achdus, it's exactly the opposite of what the Shvatim did, that they couldn't allow for another temporary Malchus of Yosef to till the ground for Mashiach. Like his dream didn't have to be but they understood it as a permanent dream. You're grabbing the throne. And that can't be. Yosef had to do the tikkun.
Question?
Rabbi, could I just ask you how you deal with the use that I'm sure people are feeling in coming to such a matzav of achdus of Mashiach ben Yosef. I mean, Mashiach's not going to come, Rebbe said, unless there's Mashiach ben Yosef does.
I want to tell you something, and maybe I shouldn't even say it, but if we don't make achdus, Hashem makes achdus for us. If if the brothers of Yosef would have made Achdus and not thrown him into a bar, they wouldn't have to go through the whole Egyptian process. Again, this is not a political share. I'm just giving an example because I'm not a politician. But and maybe I'm naive. But doesn't it seem like, I was standing at a chuppah last night with somebody, and talk about rockets and riots, and then before that the elections, and before that the corona thing, and wow. So I was talking to a chashuva person, a Rosh Yeshiva, and he said to me a very interesting thing. He said, it's not how bad the things are, it's the retzef of dvarim, it's the sort of like the flow here. And I'm not sure what he meant by that, but I'll tell you what I understood. That unfortunately, and it's so sad, that the whole corona thing that we all went through, and it was so difficult, did not make Achdus in Klal Yisrael. It did not make Achdus in Klal Yisrael. And the elections and all that did not make Achdus in Klal Yisrael. And somehow or another, this crisis that we're going through in the last 2-3 days, somehow, B'ezras Hashem, I'm hoping, maybe that's making Achdus in Klal Yisrael.
Question?
Yeah, let me just, because I don't have time, we have to go. But what I am saying is that I think I just want to say this, it's not questions, not answers. I'm just telling you what I think, take it or leave it. That I think if we don't do this, if this is not the avodas hayom, everybody in their own way of doing something, and it doesn't mean anything uncomfortable. It just means respect and understanding. Let's start with like people in your shul, or one shul and the other, and then other types of from Jews, and then other types of Jews altogether that mean well. I'm not talking about becoming secular or endorsing that or anything like that, but just creating some kind of an achdus where one is not the villain against the other. This is the kiyum of the nevuah, and the only way it could be that the Eitz Yosef and the Eitz Yehuda have to come together. There is no other way. There is no other way. It's a nevuah, and it's the nevuah is biyadenu. And until then, we're suffering from Asar Ruge Malchus, just repeating itself over and over and over again. All the machlokes. Okay, I don't want to. I'm over time, so I apologize for that. But so everybody is dismissed. What it just? I'm here.
Could you just mention the page or the chapter of the Sefer of the Shlo?
Yeah, it's in. This Shlo has a number of different volumes. If you go to one big section is called Torah Shebiksav, and then he has a chelik which is Tzoin Yosef. That's what it's called, and that takes. I can't tell you the page because there's 5 different editions, but the Tzoin Yosef you'll see right there. It's in the Tzoin Yosef.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
If neither Yosef nor the Shvatim understood the Yosef's Chalom, could it be that the purpose of the Chalom was dafka there to challenge them to bridge that gap in understanding?
Yes, and they failed.
Mm-hmm.
And the Torah is not shy about the fact that they failed, and they received an einish, and they had to go through other tikkun. And by the way, that tikkun has been going on for close to 3,000 years. I mean that or more. That tikkun has been going on and on and on. More. More. It's all about this one tikkun. And now I'm just saying, like now that the Shiur is over, everything is there. We have Eretz Yisrael, Baruch Hashem. The fact is, like we have Eretz Yisrael. We live in Eretz Yisrael. We've all chosen to live in Eretz Yisrael. We know what can be done here. We see the miracles of Eretz Yisrael. So the only thing that's missing, and like I always mention this, like, people have this kind of like mystical idea of Mashiach, which I'm sure is true. I'm sure there's like mystical and fire coming from Shemayim and all kinds of miracles. There's no question. But there's a Pashat Pshat in Mashiach. The Pashat Pshat in Mashiach is that when everything gets so confusing and there's no leadership and nobody knows what to do and everything is split up, go this way, go that way, a Mashiach could come into the Achdus and say, okay, this is the way it's going to go. And like the Rambam says in Hilchos Malachim, that the first thing the Mashiach is going to do is be Ma'ached Shivtei Yisrael, meaning like he's going to cement the Achdus, and then V'noah of Elov Kol Hagoyim, and all the world will have peace also. So who's doing that? A lot of almosts, but it can't be done if you know. I also think, and I sound like I'm making a commercial, but I just, like I say, I'm obsessed with it. I also think that even like a small group of people, a couple hundred people, a few hundred people, can mamish make a marked difference in this. And I'll tell you how I know, because it's only a small group of people that have made all the sunnah to begin with. It's the press, it's a few Michiganers, it's extremely, it only takes a few hundred, just like there's Ra, there's Toiv, but it's such a Yetzer Hara. And ad kedei kach, like, people vilify each other for nothing. Okay, I'm gonna go. Socha Rabbi, I wish everybody a good Yontiv and a good Shabbos.
Thank you very much.
Rabbi, what could we do as a Kehillah? Like, I mean, with the Rav's inspiration, Baruch Hashem, I feel that we're very Kehillah, very different types. But what could we do?
That's the job. That's the idea.
Right, and which I feel Baruch Hashem very lucky to be able to. But what could we do further?
Look, I don't. Al regel achas, I have a lot of ideas, but I think that just like there's meetings about how to get the stones on the building, there has to be meeting after meeting, like Mamish Mashiach committee of what we can do, because it's very real and it's very practical, and it's not superficial, but it's not very difficult. It's just not very difficult. I have a kesher with, the 10 people that I have a kesher with is fine. It's wonderful. They all like to say Miken, Atalo Charidi, you're not really. No, Ali Charidi, Lagamri Charidi, what? I'm not Charidi. So, like, it's so easy to repair. Lani is Daiti, and it shouldn't take violence to make us repair it. It's so easy to repair little by little, and before you know it, a movement starts. And I hope I'm not the only one in the world who's talking about it. So let's do it. But just like, I'll tell you the first thing, I'll give you one thing. Reject any conversation which has to do with Pirud. I'm telling you, just reject it. Just like you don't listen to Lashon Hara, don't listen to, this is not for me. Politely walk away. Even that, I was told as a kid, if you hear a racist joke, just don't laugh, because if you laugh, you're enabling other people. I'm not racist. I'm talking about fellow Jews. I'm not talking about Jews jokes about the Polish or the Hungarian. I'm talking about, So, and that's a good first step. All right. I wish you well. I got to leave. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.